Deuteronomy. Once you get a 2-year-old to learn how to say Deuteronomy, you know that child can learn the books of the Bible. Deuteronomy. Once you get a 40-year-old to remember where it's found, you know that person's got a bead on going back and learning what should have been learned much earlier in life. Perhaps had the opportunity been given. Deuteronomy. You ever notice that when Jesus was tempted, he quoted Deuteronomy? Deuteronomy 8. Command these stones be made bread. Jesus said, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. Cast thyself down. Man shall not live by bread alone, by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. Deuteronomy 8. Cast yourself down. Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. Deuteronomy 6. If you'll fall down and worship me, thou shalt worship the Lord thy God. Him only shalt thou serve. Again, Deuteronomy chapter 6. The book of Deuteronomy is powerful. So often we take for granted the principles and details that can be found in the Old Testament, yet in studying the book of Deuteronomy, it's not just about learning what Jesus cited when he was tempted. This is the Old Testament book that tells of that prophet that would be like Moses. Him should they hear. That's the one that they were waiting to see, Deuteronomy 18, 15 and following. In Jesus' day, they were asking John, are you that prophet? Deuteronomy. Now, if you're following along with the plan that we've endeavored to use this year, making time for eternity, then you've just started in the book of Deuteronomy. Understanding Deuteronomy, getting a clear picture of it, requires an understanding of what came before. The first 4 chapters of Deuteronomy, Moses is giving them a review of how good God's been and how bad they've been, to put it short and sweet, and how good God continues to be. And in those 2 chapters, there's a detail that stands out that ought to be noted. He's going to point out some key points of their journey and some key measurements in terms of time. Deuteronomy 1, beginning in verse 1, these be the words which Moses spake to all Israel on this side Jordan, in the wilderness, in the plain. Now this plain would be the plain of Moab. Skip down to verse 5. On this side Jordan, in the land of Moab, Moses began to declare this law. Deuteronomy, the second law or second giving of the law. It's a review of all that has been taught and an expounding upon it. But as he begins, he reminds them of where they've been. A couple of key ideas to note. Verse 6 of chapter 1. The Lord our God spake unto us in Horeb. Horeb would be Mount Sinai, where they had been immediately after leaving Egypt. They had arrived there and received the law from God. The Lord our God spake unto us in Horeb, saying, you've dwelt long enough in this mountain. So then they would march. Incidentally, skip back up to verse 2. There are 11 days' journey from Horeb, by the way of Mount Seir, unto Kadesh Barnea. The next major stopping point would be a place called Kadesh Barnea. From there, if we advance forward to chapter 1, verse 46, they would abide in Kadesh Barnea many days according to the days that they abode there. And we'll speak momentarily about why they were there many days. But from Kadesh Barnea, they would move forward, verse 3 of chapter 2. God would tell them, you've compassed this mountain long enough, you turn northward. By the time they're finally getting to the land where they need to be, doing what they need to be doing, Deuteronomy 2, verse 13 and 14. Rise up, said I, this is Moses, get you over the brook Zered. Key places to note. Egypt, Sinai, Kadesh again, then Zered. Verse 13, cross the brook Zered. We went over the brook Zered, and the space in which we came from Kadesh Barnea until we were come over the brook Zered was 38 years, until all the generation of the men of war were wasted, until they were wasted from among the host, as the Lord sware unto them. So, we have a situation where an entire generation has wasted away. We often think of what they wasted in terms of time, 40 years. But there are details given in these two chapters, if we remember what we've already read in Numbers and Exodus, that the extent of their wastefulness beggars belief. Wastefulness. Do we see it in our world today? Well, we live in a world where wastefulness has become commonplace. Things aren't built to last anymore. Remember how the Maytag repairman used to have his legs propped up and never have anything to do because their products lasted? Now the Maytag repairman has his legs propped up and nothing to do because people don't fix it. They just throw it away and get another one. Things aren't made to last. There was a time when 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 miles on that old family car, that was the way of it. But now we have a vehicle for what, 30 to 60,000 miles? Oh, it's time for a new one. So often, things aren't made to last. We just put it to the side, get another one. But when it comes to our lives, how often do we treat them like they're not made to last? How often are we wasting what's most precious? Let's take a look in these first two chapters of Deuteronomy. And in so doing, we'll also review some details from Exodus and Numbers concerning their journeys and see exactly what it was they were wasting and how they'd wasted it. Now, Deuteronomy 2:14, this entire nation had spent 38 years from Kadesh Barnea to the brook Zered. They'd wasted. Literally been consumed is the word. Verses 15 and 16 of chapter 2, they were consumed. The word's used 3 times in 3 verses, but it's translated wasted in verse 14. One thing we know they wasted was time. They wasted years. But let's see how that waste fell out. Do you remember back in chapter 1, verse 2? It said there are 11 days' journey from Horeb, Sinai, by the way of Mount Seir unto Kadesh Barnea. 11 days. Let's take a look at the map. First, they leave Egypt. Ramses is the specific location in the region of Goshen in the nation of Egypt. Numbers 33:3, they left Egypt the day after that first Passover, the 15th day of the month. Exodus 19:1, they arrive at Sinai on the first day of the 3rd month. So, it has taken them a month and a half. From the 15th day of the first month until the first day of the 3rd month is year number 1. A month and a half into their journeys there at Sinai. For what it's worth, they will be at Sinai from the first day of the 3rd month until, according to Numbers 10, verse 26, the 20th day of the 2nd month of the 2nd year. They will be at Sinai for 11 months and 20 days, 10 days short of a year. Now, one could say, wait a minute, they could have been there 40 days less had they not had a golden calf made. Moses came down and broke all 10 commandments at once and had to go up and get a Xerox copy. No matter what the case being of when they should have left Sinai, let's just keep that one short and say they've been there a year. So we take a look at a timeline as we look at our map. They arrive at Sinai after a month and a half. They're at Sinai for 11 months and 20 days. And then they begin to move. We move forward. Numbers chapter 10, verses 11 and 12 describes their journey and their destination. As they remove from Sinai, they would be journeying toward the wilderness of Paran, as it's described. Now, the wilderness of Paran, the children of Israel took their journey out of the wilderness of Sinai. The cloud rested in the wilderness of Paran. This is a region. And these verses describe the next several chapters of Numbers, because when we get to Numbers chapter 13, they are in the wilderness of Paran, Numbers 12, 16, and then moving forward. But in the wilderness of Paran, they're going to send out spies. And when those spies return to them, Numbers 13:36, the specific place where they are is called, Numbers 13:26, Kadesh. Specifically, Kadesh Barnea. You may remember that word being read when we were in Deuteronomy a moment ago. From Sinai to Kadesh Barnea. Deuteronomy 1:2, Moses said that's an 11-day journey. It took them significantly longer than that. Time will not allow us to investigate it fully, but Numbers chapter 11, they decided they wanted to gripe. The first few verses, we don't even know what the gripe was, but they complained after 3 days' journey. Are we there yet? Who knows what the complaint was? But by the time we get to verse 4, they're complaining based on what the world around them has said, and they're complaining about not having meat. The mixed multitude, or the rabble that was with them, apparently influenced the nation to complain. And God tells them, Numbers 11, verse 21, they are going to be here, they're going to eat flesh for a whole month. Now, it's an 11-day journey, but they stop and they complain and they bicker and they moan and they gripe and they murmur. And so God says here, have 30 days worth of quail, to the point that it's coming out their nostrils, literally, as God describes it. So, it should have been an 11-day journey. But 3 days into it, they gripe so much that they're in one place for 30 days. Moving forward, Numbers chapter 12. Aaron and Miriam complain about Moses. Miriam is stricken with leprosy from God because of her rebellious mentality, because she's rebelling ultimately against God, not Moses. And we're told, Numbers 12, noting verse 15, Miriam was shut out from the camp 7 days, and the people journeyed not until Miriam was brought in again. It should have been an 11-day journey. They've just stalled 30 days for their dietary complaint, and then another 7 days for a dignitary complaint. Miriam murmuring about Moses and his authority. 11 days, they've wasted 37. But it doesn't stop there. They arrive at Kadesh Barnea, and this is where they rebel. God says, go up and take the land. They send spies instead, and they say, no, we're not going to go, we're scared. Now, worth noting, when they sent those spies, go to Deuteronomy chapter 1. Numbers 13 records God telling Moses, you send the spies, but Deuteronomy 1 tells us where that all got started. Deuteronomy 1, beginning in verse 20, Moses tells the people, or the end of verse 19, we came to Kadesh Barnea. Deuteronomy 1:20, I said to you, we are coming to the mountain of the Amorites, which the Lord our God doth give unto us. God's giving us this land. Verse 21, the Lord thy God hath set the land before thee, go up and possess it. If you want it, here it is, come and get it. Literally, it's put right in front of you. As the Lord God of thy fathers hath said unto thee, fear not, neither be discouraged. Verse 22, ye came near unto me, every one of you, and said, we'll send spies up before us, that they can tell us the way that we should go. God said, go get it. They said, Moses, we need to form a committee first. We need to put together a group that can tell us whether or not this is a wise approach. Tell us the best way to go. They forgot that God's been leading them with the pillar of cloud by day, pillar of fire by night. No, we want to send some scouts into the land by what way we should go. Now, God allowed them to do this. 40 days. 40 days the spies would be in the land, according to Numbers 13. 40 more days wasted. And when those spies get back, they share that discouraging message. No, the people of the land are greater than we. We're grasshoppers in their sight. And so what does the nation of Israel do? We're not going into the land. You brought us here to die. They rebel against God. God had said, go take it. They said, no, we won't. He said, no, you got that right. You won't. You'll die in the wilderness. They'd wasted 30 days. They'd wasted 7 days. They'd wasted 40 days. Now they're going to waste 40 years. We pick up from Kadesh Barnea. They're not going to enter the land from that point. They'll leave from Kadesh, and we're not sure how long they were there. It's not specifically described. We do know this much. When they left from Kadesh, as is described in Numbers chapter 33, and then briefly described Numbers Deuteronomy 1 and 2, their departure from Kadesh results in them circling a mountain. Deuteronomy 2, verse 1. At the end of chapter 1, you had abode in Kadesh many days. Chapter 2, verse 1, we turned, we took our journey into the wilderness by way of the Red Sea, as the Lord spake unto me, and we compassed Mount Seir many days. That's wasted time. They've delayed because they griped. They delayed because of a desire for authority on the part of some other leaders. Now they are being delayed 40 days because they didn't trust God enough. Now 40 years because, again, they didn't trust God. They will travel from Kadesh down to a place called Ezion-Geber. This is described in Numbers chapter 33, verse 36. Also is described as we've just read here in Deuteronomy. But notice something. If we look at this place, Ezion-Geber, and that won't be on the test later, but you might want to note where it is because it's at the tip of the Gulf of Aqaba. From Ezion-Geber, they would travel directly back, Numbers 13:36. They removed from Ezion-Geber and pitched in the wilderness of Zin, which is Kadesh. They've just done a big circle. From Kadesh down to Ezion-Geber, back up to Kadesh. Now here's what's interesting. It's about 120 miles. It took them all of 14 days to go from Ezion-Geber straight to Kadesh at just a solid march. Now from there, we don't know exactly how long they had been at Kadesh initially. And at this point, we're not told how long it took them to go from Kadesh to Ezion-Geber and back to Kadesh. But the next leg of their journey is going to go from Kadesh the second time back down to Ezion-Geber. Now they'll pass Mount Hor, Numbers chapter 20. When they had come to Kadesh that second time, notice Numbers 20 and verse 1. This is where Miriam dies. And it's told us that this is in the first month, the people abode in Kadesh. The first month of what year? Numbers chapter 20 doesn't tell us. Numbers 33 does. It's in Numbers 20 that Miriam dies. Moses and Aaron get frustrated with the people, strike a rock twice. God punishes Moses and Aaron by saying, you're going to die in the wilderness. And by the end of Numbers chapter 20, Aaron is dead. But Numbers 33 tells us when that happened. Numbers 33, verse 38, Aaron the priest went up to Mount Hor and died there according to the commandment of the Lord. After the children of Israel were come out of the land of Egypt in the first day of the 5th month. This is in the 40th year, first day, 5th month. So, when they returned to Kadesh that second time, it's been 40 years. They're in the 40th year when Miriam dies. They're in the 40th year when Aaron dies. They are in the 40th year when they continue marching. Numbers 20 verses 21 and 22 describes them going through, leaving from Kadesh, going around Edom, and up on the other side of Edom, they'll end up approaching Moab. But this route will take them, Deuteronomy 2 and verse 8, past Ezion-Geber again. So they've done two big circles, or a big circle and a half. Now they're heading northward until they cross the brook Zered. The brook Zered, described in Deuteronomy 2:14. Key parts of their journey, from Ramses to Sinai, month and a half. From Sinai to Kadesh, should have been 11 days. They spent at least an extra 37. From Kadesh, they were told to go up into the land and take it. They said, let's send some spies. Wasted 40 days. Spies came back and said, boy, those people up there are big and their cities are walled. The people said, we're not going to go. They wasted 40 years. And from Kadesh to Ezion-Geber, a journey that should have taken some 14 days tops. they are going to have spent, well, let's look at Deuteronomy 2:14 again. Whereas they returned to Kadesh in that first month of the 40th year, by the time they're crossing the brook Zered, still in the 40th year, it has been, Deuteronomy 2:14, 38 years from the time they left Kadesh the first time to the time that they're crossing that brook Zered. The point, simply this: from Kadesh down to Ezion-Geber and back could have taken a total of 28 days. It took them 37 some odd years to go from Kadesh to Ezion-Geber. They were killing time while a nation died, while a generation fell away. They weren't just wasting time, they were wasting years. Their lives had been thrown away. Now, from where they are crossing the brook Zered, they'll be entering into the land of Canaan in just a matter of months. In fact, when the book of Deuteronomy begins, we're told, Deuteronomy 1 verse 3, this is on the 40th year in the 11th month on the first day of the month. Moses begins speaking to them in the final month of the 40th year, first day of the month. They've only got another month and a half before they cross into the land, because they'll be in the land by the 15th day of what would be the 41st year, to make a total of 40 complete years, because they didn't leave Egypt until the 15th day of the first month in that first year. So Moses knows they have a month and a half left. They have spent all of this time in the wilderness in a journey that could have taken a month and a half to get to Sinai, 11 days to get to Kadesh, and then go straight up into the land. They could have been in the wilderness, having received the law from God at Sinai, and then at Kadesh and entering the land in just over a year's time. They spent 40. What about us? Are we ever guilty of wasting time like this? Sitting in one spot doing nothing, or just wandering around because we don't want to listen to what God's had to say. Now, it's not just a matter of years that have been wasted. Let's combine some other details, because they're also wasting fears. Deuteronomy 1, picking up at verse 27. God had told them, you go up and possess the land, verse 21. They'd said, let us check it out first. The spies come back. Verse 27, after they hear what the spies have to say, you murmured in your tents and said, because the Lord hated us, He brought us forth out of the land. You don't love me. That's their mentality. They sound like Samson's wife. You don't love me because the Lord hated us. You know, by the time we get to the book of Judges, it said that there's no king in Israel. But even in Moses' day, there were plenty of drama queens. You hated us. They're making a big deal out of what ought to be a matter of trust. Because God hated us, He brought us here. God's made everything too hard. Verse 28, God had said, go up. They say, well, how shall we go up? Our brethren have discouraged our hearts, saying the people is greater and taller than we, and the cities are great and walled up to heaven. Moreover, we've seen the sons of the Anakims there. They're giants. They're scared. Now Moses tells them, beginning in verse 29, dread not, neither be afraid. Matter of fact, he had told them that whenever they first came to the land, back in verse 21, fear not, neither be discouraged. But they, not in prudence, but in scaredy-catedness, said, let's send some spies. They, when the spies return, say, we're afraid. Fear not, neither be discouraged. Be not discouraged nor dismayed. Be not afraid. Dread not. Don't be afraid. Yet they were. They were more afraid of what lay ahead than who ruled above. They were more afraid of the challenges than the Lord. So often it's the case that in this life we are more afraid of the small obstacle in front of us than the God who carries us. And God had carried them. Moses will actually point out to these Israelites here in Deuteronomy chapter 1. Picking up at verse 33. God's gone out the way before you. He searched you out a place to pitch your tents, to show you by what way you should go, in a cloud by day. God has been with you. He's brought you this far. He's taken care of you, but you wouldn't listen. You wouldn't listen to His leadership. You wouldn't listen to the way that He's borne you and helped you. The point? They were afraid of giants and they were afraid of walled cities. They were afraid of obstacles that they saw in front of them. The interesting thing, by the time we get to Deuteronomy chapter 2, remember, they'd come back to this place called Kadesh. But instead of God letting them go up into the land from there, as was seemingly going to happen before, now God says, nope, you're going to come back around Edom. You won't pass through Edom. Edom won't let you. But you'll go around Edom, taking the long route. And as you pass Edom, then you're going to pass Moab. Deuteronomy 2, picking up at verse 4, you are to pass through the coast of your brethren, the children of Esau. This is Edom. Verse 5, meddle not with them, for I will not give you their land, not a footbreadth. Deuteronomy 2:5, I've given Mount Seir to Esau. He says the same thing about Moab. Look at verse 9. The Lord said to me, distress not the Moabites, neither contend with them in battle. I will not give thee of their land. They would pass Edom as they dipped down to Ezion-Geber the second time. They would pass Moab as they came up on the other side of Edom and went further northward. And then after they passed Moab, they would be in the region, verse 19, when thou comest nigh over against the children of Ammon, distress them not, nor meddle with them. I will not give thee of the land of the children of Ammon any possession, because I gave it to them. God leads Israel on a route where they're going to pass Edom, they're going to pass Moab, they're going to pass Ammon. But God doesn't just mention the names of the nations they're going to pass. God points out, I gave them those lands. And when God gave them those lands, Deuteronomy 2, look at verse 10. Speaking of the land that He had given Moab, He said, the Emims dwelt there in times past, a people great and many and tall as the Anakims. You remember the Anakims. The Anakims are the people that scared Israel out of their boots. Numbers 13:33 and Deuteronomy chapter 1 verse 28. We've seen the sons of the Anakims there. They didn't want to go because they'd seen these big tall folks. But the land God gave Moab, those giants' cousins lived there previously. But Numbers 2 verse 11, which were accounted as giants, those Emims, like the Anakims, but the Moabites called them Emims. God gave Moab land that belonged to giants. He did the same thing with the Edomites. Verse 12, the Horims also, which dwelt in Seir aforetime, but the children of Esau succeeded them when they destroyed them. Moab, giants used to live there. Edom, giants used to live there. Look at verse 20. After God mentions Ammon, Israel's going to pass by and not meddle with them. But verse 20, that the land of Ammon was also accounted a land of giants. Giants dwelt there in old time. And the Ammonites called them Zamzamim, a people great and many and tall as the Anakims. But the Lord destroyed them before them. Verse 22, as He did to the children of Esau, which dwelt in Seir, when He destroyed the Horims. Did you catch that? The children of Israel came to Kadesh Barnea, and they said, we're not going into the land. The people there are too big. The cities are too walled. So 38 years later, when it's time for a new generation to enter, God parades them past Edom, where giants used to live, but God destroyed the giants in front of Edom and gave Edom the land. Past Moab, where the Emim giants used to live, but God destroyed the giants before Moab and gave Moab the land. And then past Ammon, where the Zamzamim once lived, but God destroyed those giants and He gave it to Ammon. But you Israelites wouldn't listen to me 38 years ago. They were afraid of people great and tall. instead of their God great and mighty. Add to that, by the time we get to the end of Deuteronomy chapter 2, they fought against this ruler called Sihon. They've conquered one Amorite king. They're going to fight against another called Og, Deuteronomy chapter 3. Notice what's said about Og, whom they conquer. Deuteronomy 3:11, for only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnant of giants. They had been afraid of giants. That's why they didn't enter the land. Now they fought with one and his people and been victorious. Why? Because God had given them the victory. Oh, and not only had they defeated the big guy, but notice, if you will, verses 4 and 5 of Deuteronomy 3, we took all his cities. At the time, there was not a city which we took not from them. What kind of cities? Verse 5, all these cities were fenced with high walls and gates and bars, beside unwalled towns a great many. Do you ever look at other Christians, other congregations, and think, how are they accomplishing that? How have they grown that much? How did they get that far? How are they doing that? It's because they didn't let fear determine their